The global cocaine market is worth an estimated $500 billion annually. That makes it larger than the GDP of Sweden, larger than the GDP of Poland, larger than the entire economy of Belgium. It is the fastest-growing illicit market on Earth, according to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. Global production hit a record 3,708 metric tons in 2023, a 34% increase from the year before, and 4 times higher than a decade ago. 25 million people used cocaine last year. That number was 17 million a decade ago. The supply is growing. The demand is growing. The money is growing. And almost none of the people running this business have ever touched the product. Chapter 1. The farm. It starts with a leaf. The coca plant grows at altitude in the Andean highlands of Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia. These 3 countries produce virtually all of the world's cocaine supply. Colombia alone accounts for 67% of global coca cultivation. In 2023, Colombian farmers planted coca across 253,000 hectares of land, an area roughly the size of Luxembourg. The farmer at the bottom of this supply chain earns between 56 cents and 72 cents per kilogram of coca leaf. 1 kilogram of coca leaf, 72 cents. It takes approximately 300 to 500 kilograms of coca leaf to produce 1 kilogram of cocaine hydrochloride, the refined white powder that reaches the street. At farm gate prices, the raw leaf cost for 1 kilogram of finished cocaine is between $170 and $360. That same kilogram of cocaine, by the time it reaches a wholesale buyer in Mexico, is worth $12,000. By the time it crosses the U.S. border, its value is $25,000 to $30,000. By the time it is broken into gram-sized retail units on the streets of New York or Chicago, that single kilogram generates $100,000 to $150,000 in street-level revenue. A markup of somewhere between 62,000 and 80,000 times the farm gate cost of the raw material. No legal commodity on earth produces a markup remotely close to that number. The farmer growing the coca sees almost none of it. Chapter 2. The supply chain. A cocaine cartel is not one organization. It is a franchised logistics network with multiple independent layers, each of which takes a cut and carries its own risk. Layer 1 is production. Coca farmers sell to local buyers, small operators who purchase the leaf and move it to processing labs hidden in jungle clearings. These labs convert the leaf through a chemical process into cocaine paste, then into cocaine base, then into the finished hydrochloride powder. The chemists running these labs earn a salary. They are employees. The risk they carry is high. The share of the final profit they receive is small. Layer 2 is the cartel itself, the wholesale exporter. This is where the real economics begin. The cartel purchases processed cocaine at around $1,500 per kilogram in Colombia. It then moves that product across borders, through the Pacific, through Central America, through West Africa, through the Caribbean, and delivers it to wholesale buyers in consumer markets. The cartel's cost per kilogram, including processing, transportation, bribes, logistics, and the statistical cost of seizures, runs roughly $2,000 to $4,000 per kilogram all in. Their selling price in the United States, $12,000 to $30,000 per kilogram, depending on the route and the buyer. That is a gross margin of between 200 and 700% on the wholesale transaction alone. Layer 3 is distribution, the mid-level wholesaler operating inside the consumer country. They buy from the cartel, cut the product, and sell to street-level dealers in smaller quantities at higher prices. Their margin is thinner than the cartels, but their risk is higher. They are operating inside the jurisdiction with the most aggressive law enforcement. Layer 4 is the street dealer, the person at the bottom of the distribution chain, in the most visible position, carrying the most immediate legal risk, earning the least per unit moved. More than 90% of the value generated in the cocaine supply chain is created at the distribution stage, not at the farm, not in the lab, not even at the cartel level. It is created by the act of moving product from a wholesale price to a retail price inside a consumer market. The money is not in growing the drug. The money is in the last mile. Chapter 3. The cartel as a corporation. Pablo Escobar understood this before anyone else in the modern drug trade. At the peak of his Medellín Cartel in the late 1980s, Escobar's organization was generating an estimated $420 million per week. His personal net worth reached $30 billion. Forbes listed him as the seventh richest man in the world in 1989. The cartel controlled more than 80% of all cocaine entering the United States. It operated its own fleet of aircraft, its own submarine routes, its own network of corrupted officials across Colombia, Panama, and the United States. It had a payroll, a logistics department, an intelligence operation, and an enforcement arm. Escobar's organization spent $2,500 per month on rubber bands, just to bundle the cash. His brother Roberto, the cartel's chief accountant, later wrote that they would write off 10% of their cash holdings every year, not because of bad investments or seizures, but because rats ate through the bills and storage and water damaged the bundles hidden in warehouses and fields. $2.1 billion written off annually, not as a loss, as a cost of doing business. The Medellín Cartel eventually collapsed, not because of economics, but because of war. Escobar declared war on the Colombian state. He assassinated presidential candidates, bombed civilian aircraft, and placed bounties on police officers. The state eventually responded with the full force of its military. Escobar was killed on a rooftop in Medellín on December 2, 1993, the day after his 44th birthday. The Cali cartel, which had quietly built market share while Escobar fought the government, stepped into the vacuum and within 2 years controlled the majority of the global cocaine trade. When Cali collapsed, the Mexican cartels took over distribution. The business did not stop. It reorganized. Chapter 4. The Modern Cartel. The Sinaloa cartel today operates differently from the Medellín model. Where Escobar built a vertically integrated empire and declared open war on the state, the Sinaloa model is horizontal, franchised, and deliberately low profile. It does not seek to control territory through military force. It seeks to control logistics, the routes, the border crossings, the port officials, the customs agents, the bankers. Mexican trafficking organizations collectively earn between $19 and $29 billion per year from drug sales in the United States alone, according to the U.S. State Department. Sinaloa is the largest and most profitable of them all, according to the DEA. El Chapo, Joaquin Guzman Lora, ran Sinaloa for decades. His estimated net worth at arrest ranged from $1 billion to $12 billion, depending on the source. He escaped from maximum security prisons twice, once through a mile-long tunnel built under his cell with a motorcycle-equipped rail system. The second escape was through a tunnel under a shower drain. Both escapes were organizational achievements. They required engineers, construction workers, logistics coordinators, and corrupted officials at multiple levels of the Mexican prison system. When El Chapo was finally extradited to the United States and convicted in 2019, sentenced to life plus 30 years, the Sinaloa cartel continued operating without interruption. In October 2024, Mexico's highest-ranking law enforcement official from 2006 to 2012, Genaro Garcia Luna, the man responsible for fighting the cartels, was sentenced to nearly 40 years in prison in the United States after being found guilty of taking millions of dollars in bribes from the Sinaloa cartel and enabling the trafficking of more than 1 million kilograms of cocaine into the U.S. The head of Mexico's anti-drug enforcement, on the Sinaloa payroll. That is not corruption at the edges of the system. That is the system. Chapter 5. The Money Problem. The cocaine business generates a problem that no legitimate business has. Too much cash. At peak production levels, a mid-sized distribution network moving 500 kilograms of cocaine per week into a U.S. city generates approximately $5 to $7.5 million in cash per week. In small bills. Untraceable. Unusable in the formal economy without explanation. This cash has to go somewhere. The process of moving drug money into the legitimate financial system is called money laundering. And it turns out that the most efficient institution for laundering drug money is not a shell company in the Cayman Islands or a cryptocurrency exchange in Eastern Europe. It is a bank. HSBC, one of the world's largest financial institutions, admitted to U.S. prosecutors in 2012 that it had helped at least $881 million controlled by the Sinaloa cartel and other Mexican drug gangs flow through its branches. Cartel operatives had developed cash deposit boxes engineered to fit the exact dimensions of the teller windows at HSBC branches in Mexico. They deposited hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash in a single day. The bank's compliance systems ignored it. HSBC paid a $1.92 billion settlement. No individual banker was charged. No one went to prison. The bank paid the fine, served 5 years of monitoring, and continued operating. In 2024, TD Bank was fined $3 billion, a record penalty, for facilitating the laundering of drug cartel money through its accounts. Over 6 years, more than 90% of the bank's transactions went unmonitored. 3 separate money laundering networks moved more than $670 million through TD Bank accounts. The U.S. Attorney General said at the time, by making its services convenient for criminals, TD Bank became one. The fine was $3 billion. TD Bank's 2024 revenue was $39 billion. The math of getting caught is not a deterrent when the math of not getting caught is profitable enough. Chapter 6. Why it keeps growing. The cocaine supply chain has been the target of the most expensive law enforcement operation in human history. The United States has spent over $1 trillion on the war on drugs since it was declared by Richard Nixon in 1971. The DEA employs nearly 10,000 people. The U.S. military has conducted interdiction operations across the Caribbean, the Pacific, and Central America for decades. Global cocaine seizures in 2023 hit a record 2,275 metric tons, a 68% increase over 4 years. And yet global cocaine production also hit a record, 3,708 metric tons. More cocaine produced than ever. More cocaine seized than ever. More cocaine reaching consumers than ever. There is a structural reason for this. Seizing cocaine does not destroy the economics of the cartel. It increases them. Every kilogram seized raises the risk premium on the next kilogram. Higher risk demands higher compensation for the smugglers, for the corrupted officials, for the transporters. Higher compensation requires higher prices at wholesale. Higher wholesale prices mean the product that does reach market generates more profit per unit. Law enforcement, at scale, functions as a price support mechanism for the cocaine market. The only thing that has consistently reduced cocaine use in consumer markets is long-term reduction in demand, through treatment, through economic opportunity, through changing social patterns. Supply-side enforcement has never produced a sustained reduction in either supply or consumption anywhere it has been tried at scale. The business survives because the demand is real, the margin is extraordinary, and the people with the most to lose are the ones at the bottom of the supply chain. The farmers earning 72 cents per kilogram, the street dealers earning $10 per transaction, not the cartel executives whose net worth survives every enforcement action that doesn't personally reach them. Chapter 7. What collapses it? Cocaine cartels do not primarily fail because of law enforcement. They fail because of war. The Medellín Cartel collapsed because Escobar declared war on the Colombian state and lost. The Cali Cartel collapsed because its leadership negotiated surrender terms and was imprisoned. The Tijuana Cartel collapsed because of internal family violence that destroyed its leadership structure. The Beltran Leyva organization collapsed because it went to war with Sinaloa and lost. Every major cartel collapse in the modern era traces back to the same cause. The organization turned its violence inward or outward to a degree that made its elimination a political priority rather than a law enforcement priority. When a cartel bombs a civilian airliner, assassinates a presidential candidate, or wages open urban warfare that raises the body count to levels that appear on international news, the state responds differently than it does to a logistics network quietly moving product through ports. Ecuador's homicide rate went from 7.8 per 100,000 in 2020 to 45.7 in 2023 as cartel conflicts over new trafficking routes escalated. Ecuador declared a state of internal armed conflict. Military units were deployed. The cartels didn't stop operating, but their logistics in Ecuador became significantly more expensive. The economics of the cocaine trade are nearly indestructible as long as the violence stays below a political threshold. The moment it crosses that threshold, the calculus changes, not because the market disappears, but because a new organization with better discipline steps in to fill the vacuum and runs the business more quietly. The product changes hands. The business continues. The number that stays with you. A coca farmer in Colombia earns 72 cents per kilogram of leaf. The same leaf, processed and distributed, generates $150,000 on a street in New York. Every step between those two numbers is a business decision, about risk, about margin, about who absorbs the cost of enforcement and who captures the profit. The farmers absorb the eradication. The street dealers absorb the arrests. The mid-level distributors absorb the seizures. The cartel executives absorb the occasional extradition. The banks pay the fine. And the money, most of it, ends up in the legitimate financial system. Because that is the only place large enough to hold it.